Good evening. You're watching World News Tonight on TVP World. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. Coming up, the Ukrainian government has appointed Andriy Sybiha to be the country's new foreign minister. More on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Poland and Lithuania are strengthening their bilateral relations. Polish law enforcement has searched the apartment of far-right activist Robert Bąkiewicz. The European Commission plans to review the dynamic pricing scheme of ticket sales for the Oasis reunion tour that prompted outcry from enraged fans. The Ukrainian government has approved Andriy Sybiha as the country's new foreign minister. Now, the former Ukrainian ambassador to Turkey, Sybiha also served as deputy head of the Office of President and first deputy foreign minister.
The Ukrainian government has approved Andriy Sybiha as the country's new foreign minister, the former minister-counselor at the Ukrainian embassy in Poland. Sybiha also served as deputy head of the Office of the President and first deputy foreign minister. Sybiha is replacing Dmytro Kuleba, Ukraine's most recognizable politician after Volodymyr Zelensky.
His resignation was long expected. He's set to become ambassador in one of the G7 countries. He asked for it. This change is not a result of criticism or President Zelensky's disappointment.
Experts believe that it is unlikely that this nomination could bring a major shift in Ukraine's foreign policy strategy.
When it comes to Ukraine's position in the world, it will be a sort of continuation of the politics of Kuleba because he was his deputy for a very long time.
Oleksandr Kamyshin, the former Minister of Strategic Industries, is reportedly set to become a presidential advisor within the same field. Herman Smetanin, the current head of a key manufacturer of military hardware, Ukroboronprom, is set to take his place in the cabinet.
We need new energy today, and these steps are related only to the strengthening of our state in different directions. International policy, diplomacy is not an exception.
More nominations are expected to follow in the coming days. The changes in the cabinet were already expected to take place in June, but were delayed by the complicated procedure required to dismiss ministers.
The military situation dictates what needs to happen on the political level, and of course, the big picture here is that we're approaching the US election.
Zelensky's opponents are criticizing the reshuffle as a power grab aiming to stuff important positions with loyalists. Zelensky's official term in office ended in May, but due to Ukraine being under martial law, presidential elections have been postponed.
Poland and Lithuania will support each other's candidates for EU commissioners, according to several MEPs from both countries. Now, as we're approaching the vote on the top positions in the European Commission, Vilnius and Warsaw are strengthening their cooperation, especially when it comes to defense.
Poland has been eyeing the position of EU Budget Commissioner, with Piotr Serafin as its candidate.
We will now face the hearing in the European Parliament, so I'm counting on the support of all MEPs.
During Thursday's visit of the Irish Prime Minister to Poland, Polish PM Donald Tusk said Serafin is getting close to achieving that goal.
It is no secret that Poland is trying for an area that could, in simple terms, be called the European budget. We are on the right track. This position will enable us to more effectively enforce certain obvious security needs.
Apart from the EU budget, countries from Central Eastern Europe could also play an important role when it comes to defense. Lithuania is aiming to make its two-time former Prime Minister Andrius Kubilius the first ever EU Defense Commissioner, and Poland would be rather happy with that choice as well. I asked Janusz Lewandowski, an MEP from the European People's Party, what he thought about Polish and Lithuanian commissioners potentially cooperating in the future. Lewandowski had previously served as the EU Budget Commissioner between 2010 and 2014.
Andrius Kubilius has such a variety of experience, also experience of encounters with the Bolshevik Russia, but he should be a good companion and finding a common line.
Poland and Lithuania share the same concern. They are joined by the so-called Suwałki Gap. This thin line is the most likely location of a potential Russian attack, If Moscow ever decided to invade NATO, it would be right here, between the Kaliningrad region and Belarus. Petras Austrevicius, a Lithuanian MEP from Renew Europe, told me former Prime Minister Kubilius would be the perfect choice for Defense Commissioner in light of the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine.
I have a trust in Mr. Serafin, who was really well engaged, knowledgeable man in European affairs. So we have to give a certain credit of confidence as well as support, and ask our candidates in the European Commission to work for stronger, more united Europe.
The tighter partnership between Warsaw and Vilnius was also evident during the second day of the visit of Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda to Poland. Both he and Polish President Andrzej Duda signed a declaration on future cooperation in Lublin on Thursday. Now that we know all the candidates for the commissions, we are waiting for the debates inside the commissions, where the candidates will be able to present what they can bring to the table as the future commissioners of the European Union. This will happen around mid-September, and after that the European Parliament will vote on the entire lineup of future EU commissioners.
After traveling to Singapore and Malaysia, the Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski is wrapping up his visit in Asia. Now, his last stop in the Philippines capital was filled with top-level meetings in a bid to boost Polish business in the region and strengthen relations. Our very own correspondent Don Arleth was there and has the details in this next report.
Today, the tour of Polish diplomacy in Southeast Asia has come to a close. In just a number of days, Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski, together with his diplomatic team, have toured 3 countries, starting in Singapore, going to Malaysia, and ending up here in the Philippines. I spoke with Minister Sikorski today and had an exclusive interview, and of course I got his impressions of what he thought about this whole trip and whether it was a success. In fact, Polish diplomacy hasn't really engaged the region for quite some time, so this trip was really long overdue.
I think it is important to remember that our political, economic, and security interests lie not only in our immediate neighborhood, but also further afield. The 3 countries that I've just visited, Malaysia, Singapore, and the Philippines, all stress, for example, that they are affected by the war in Ukraine, by the Russian invasion, that they felt the rise in food prices and energy prices. They, of course, have a vote at the UN, which is important. They take part in the global conversation, and they meet with the leaders of Russia and China. So it's important to influence their opinion.
Now, today I also was able to speak with Secretary of Foreign Affairs for the Philippines, Enrique Manalo. Also having an exclusive interview with him and really just getting to get the lay of the land and see exactly what he thought about the visit. And of course, one thing that was on my mind is exactly what the Philippines thinks about the war in Ukraine.
Ever since the conflict began, we have supported, the Philippines has consistently supported all the General Assembly resolutions which have been passed on the issue. In fact, I think there have been about 6 or 7, which we have supported all of them. And I think the basic reason for that is we are fully committed to the principles of the United Nations, especially the respect for sovereignty and the settlement of disputes through peaceful means. And this is all grounded in the UN Charter and our great respect for international law and a rules-based order. And we think those are the fundamental issues which really cause deep concern to us.
While there were no major agreements on this trip, like I mentioned earlier, to sum it up, it's all about identifying the areas of cooperation for Poland, for Malaysia, for Singapore, and here in the Philippines. Of course, trying to line up interests as best as possible, boost business, boost trade, and of course, boost dialogue. Reporting from Manila, Don Arleth, TVP World.
Polish law enforcement searched the apartment of far-right activist Robert Bąkiewicz in connection with an investigation into threats and racist slogans at the 2018 Independence Day March, which was co-organized by Bąkiewicz.
The prosecution said the search aimed to help identify a man who issued threats towards another participant during the 2018 rally.
According to the findings of the investigation, the dress and behavior of the perpetrator of this act indicate that he was a member of the Independence March Guard.
But Bąkiewicz claims that he is being targeted by a politically motivated investigation.
After today's obvious political action, I perceive it as such. The intentions are clear. There is an attempt to intimidate me, an attempt to destroy me.
In Poland, Independence Day marches are considered far-right rallies. They are notorious for inflicting damage on Warsaw's infrastructure, as well as devastating shops and even burning a flat in the city center in 2020. The 2018 march, on the other hand, was relatively peaceful, with the ruling party involved in the commemorations.
In 2018, it was bigger than usual march because it was semi-organized by Polish authorities, Polish President Andrzej Duda, to commemorate the 100th anniversary of regaining independence by Poland.
Under the guise of patriotic values, Bąkiewicz promotes radical nationalism, xenophobia and racism. On Friday, he will be taking part in a hearing in connection with his act of violence. In 2020, he threw a woman down the stairs during protests against the abortion ban. He later embarked upon a political career and has grown to become a close ally of the former ruling party, Law and Justice.
Well, in general, the politicians of the United Right coalition have been working very closely with Mr. Bąkiewicz for years. We also know, if my memory serves me right, that he was also a Law and Justice candidate in the last parliamentary elections. They also worked closely with him. He did dirty work for them and was amply rewarded.
Radical nationalist organizations connected with Bąkiewicz have received a downpour of government funding, reportedly totaling up to several $1 million.
Okopress, one of the most important investigative journalism newspapers, they presented some connections between especially Minister of Culture during Law and Justice government and some foundations, institutions led by Mr. Bąkiewicz.
And Bąkiewicz is being defended by the former ruling party, the conservatist Law and Justice.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is indeed a remarkable and a scandalous thing. Without completing all the formalities, without specific charges, on the basis of some imaginary speculation, one enters someone's apartment and takes someone else's property.
As part of the ongoing investigation into the case, the headquarters of the Independence Day Association, the organizers of the march, have also been searched.
An armed man was shot and killed during an exchange of fire with local police forces near the Israeli consulate in Munich. Now, the attack's date, September 5th, coincides with the 52nd anniversary of the terrorist attack on Israeli athletes during the 1972 Munich Olympic Games.
Authorities are investigating whether there is a direct link between today's shooting and the 1972 terrorist attack carried out by members of the Palestinian group Black September.
One thing is clear, there are serious suspicions because today is also the day of remembrance, the anniversary of the attack at the 1972 Olympic Games.
52 years ago, 8 assailants infiltrated the Munich Olympic Village, killed 2 members of the Israeli Olympic team and took 9 others hostage, who were later killed in a failed rescue attempt. On Thursday morning, local police announced a wide-scale operation with aerial support in the Munich city centre. Around 9 a.m. local time, a brief exchange of fire was reported in the area. Shots were fired in the vicinity of a Nazi documentation center near Israel's general consulate.
The protection of Jewish and Israeli institutions, as you know, has top priority. It is, of course, very bitter that the shooting took place in front of the Nazi Documentation Center and Israel's General Consulate of all places.
The shooter is believed to have acted alone and was the shootout's only casualty. Law enforcement had previously classified him as an Islamist.
We can confirm that the perpetrator has now been identified, and as far as I know, he is an 18-year-old with Austrian citizenship who lives in Austria.
Israel's General Consulate in Munich has already been targeted this year. In May, unknown perpetrators threw a dummy explosive device through the facility's fence, an event which put local police forces on high alert.
The Oasis reunion tour is some of the biggest news in the world of music in recent months. Now, the ticket sales, however, sparked controversy, leading to the European Commission announcing plans to review the ticket distributors' dynamic pricing scheme that prompted outcry from enraged fans. Our UK correspondent, Klaudia Czerwinska, took a closer look at the ticket fiasco and has this report.
Only days after the UK's Competition and Markets Authority said it was urgently reviewing ticket sales for the much-anticipated Oasis tour, the European Commission's spokesperson announced the body will be reviewing the questionable practice of spiking prices during ticket sales. The issue was also addressed by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer during the PMQs on Wednesday.
It's great that Oasis are back together. I think, from what I've determined, about half the country is probably queuing for tickets over the weekend. But it is depressing to hear of price hikes. I'm committed to putting fans at the heart of music and end extortionate price resales, and we're starting a consultation to work out how best we can do this.
Dynamic pricing, also known as surge pricing, involves increasing prices at times of high demand. The practice, widespread in the US, is fairly new in Europe and in the UK. The culprit behind dynamic pricing in case of Oasis tour is, for the most part, Ticketmaster LLC, an American sales and distribution company owned by Live Nation US.
I think here, maybe there was a consumer protection issue, and I think it was around transparency. I think, people like me, we were queuing for sort of 6 hours on this, website, finally got to the front of the queue. You put your, find your tickets, and you've agreed with your mates or your family in advance what's the maximum you're willing to pay. You've checked you've got the limit on your credit card, you're all prepared. And suddenly the price that pops up isn't what you're expecting.
Thousands waited for hours in virtual lines to later find their prices hiked from approximately £150 to nearly £360 or more. Those lucky enough to get to checkout were met with this unpleasant surprise, leading to anger and frustration.
It was ridiculous. My friend bought some for like $2,500 each, and she bought 4 of them. But they were just too expensive.
I think the prices were absolutely ridiculous. Like, what was it, like 300 for something? And I feel like it should be like at least 100. But that's just my opinion. It should be a bit cheaper.
What was meant to be a celebration of music turned into a disappointing tale of extortion by ticket distributors, who claimed that the decision was left to the artists and their team. Oasis denied involvement in the decision, blaming it on the distributors. And maybe the UK government and the EU Commission will be the ones to save Oasis fans from extortion. Time will tell.
I only want to see the light that shines.
And now back to our main story this evening. Now, the Ukrainian government has approved Andrei Sybiha as the country's new foreign minister. Sybiha was Ukraine's former ambassador to Turkey and also served as deputy head of the office of the president and first deputy foreign minister. Also, between 2008 and 2012, he was an advisor envoy of the Embassy of Ukraine in Poland. And now joining us to discuss these latest developments and what impact they may have on Ukraine's foreign policy is Bohdan Nahailo, editor-in-chief of the Kyiv Post. Mr. Nahailo, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Good evening from Kyiv.
Good evening. I hope that you're staying safe. Now, Mr. Nahailo, President Zelensky mentioned that the reshuffle is meant to strengthen the state, and what we've been hearing a lot is actually the term that he used, to give it new energy. Now, can you please explain what specific areas of governance or policy might benefit from this new energy that the president is talking about, and leadership? What does Zelensky mean by this terminology?
I don't know. We have to ask President Zelensky. I think this is an excuse for him to be consistent with his pattern of avoiding explanation and suddenly removing people from their posts, putting in other people in place. I've just written a piece for the Kyiv Post, a kind of editorial, if you want, from myself, saying, look, this is not really on for a democracy. Not explaining to the population, to Parliament, what is behind these big changes, because it's not just the foreign minister, it's a whole series of ministers, but also other officials beforehand. It fits into the pattern of his way of doing things. And when I say his, it's his team. It's this very small, closed circuit of friends, colleagues, supporters in the presidential office who are, unfortunately, and I hate to use the term, but I did use it publicly at some risk today, calling it an oligarchy, because an oligarchy is not just ruled by rich people. It's an oligarchy. An oligarchy is when a small closed circuit of people, influential, take control, not necessarily by constitutional means. I'm not saying it's a coup d'etat of any sort. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that because of war, because of the exceptional circumstances, this small group of people who have no constitutional basis for their influence other than the patronage of the president. And so it's a bit disturbing, and let's say it hasn't gone down very well in the public. I'm in Kyiv, I'm speaking to people. People are saying, no, this is not really what we expect from a president who publicly, for the external world, is very conscious of the PR aspects of doing his job, mobilizing support for Ukraine, but domestically is not really sharing the information that's needed and the explanations.
Well, I was just going to ask you about exactly what the Ukrainians themselves are saying, but just to go back to what you were saying, how you believe that there is no explanation. The timing of this cabinet reshuffle is particularly interesting, coming just before President Zelensky's trip to the United States, right? Now, how do you think this might actually shift in Ukraine's leadership, and how will this affect Zelensky's discussions with President Biden and also other Western leaders?
I wouldn't read too much into it. I don't think it's America's influence or conditionality from the West. Look, there's been talk for several months about major shifts. You remember when the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian army, Zaluzhny, was suddenly removed after weeks of speculation without any real transparency as to the reasons. Even at that stage, there was talk about pending changes in the government. It's taken months, and we've heard rumors for the last months that even the prime minister is going to be changed. But I think what is very disappointing at this stage from a leader who is so open with the West is the lack of transparency at home. There's no real explanation why. I mean, have these people let the side down? He is talking about energizing the government. So what have these people been doing? They've been sleeping. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Foreign Affairs Ministry has effectively been shifted aside, and the head of the presidential office with no constitutional basis to his powers, Yermak, has become the de facto foreign minister and spokesperson for the foreign ministry. Kuleba has for months been a lame duck foreign minister. He's done his best to present Ukraine's case. And what I found very bitter today and very disappointing, that when it came to discussing his dismissal and replacement in Parliament today, first, he didn't show up, so that meant he was not happy. He didn't go voluntarily. B, there were no kudos. There were no messages of, hey, well done for 2.5, 3 years. You really did a good job for the country. Where is that? So why are foreign diplomats, the EU, the US, etc., saying, Kuleba, well done, thank you, we were happy to work with you, and yet silence from within the Ukrainian government. It's not because he did something wrong. And this internal power politics, shifting influence, and, shall we say, a small group of people around the president monopolizing influence, this is becoming quite disturbing and not what we need in a democracy, fighting for democracy in Eastern Europe.
With Andrei Sybiha now replacing Dmytro Kuleba as Ukraine's foreign minister, I mean, you just mentioned that. How do you think that this is going to change, that it's going to impact Ukraine's foreign policy now, especially in his relationship with the West and NATO?
I don't think it's going to change at all. I've met him. I have the highest respect for him. He's a very intelligent, seasoned expert on foreign relations. But remember, he is somebody coming from inside the president's internal team. Right. He has spent years there, and he has been shifted temporarily to be foreign minister, awaiting his appointment, the removal of Kuleba to be foreign minister. That is what's not really on. That's really what is disappointing. He himself, no problems with him. I'm sure that he will continue Ukrainian foreign policy in the same direction as before, and will be a capable exponent of Ukraine's interests and needs.
Mr. Nahailo, now, if I can ask you from a Ukrainian perspective, how might, of course, Kuleba's resignation and now Andrei Sybiha's nomination as Ukraine's new Minister of Foreign Affairs influence Ukraine's relationship with Poland? Now, could this lead to an altercation of how Ukraine is going to engage with its neighbors, but particularly about the specific relationship between Poland and Ukraine? I mean, we know that Sybiha did spend time also as an envoy in Poland. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Sybiha was there in a fairly junior role, and at a time when you had a very good, active ambassador from Ukraine there. I happen to know him. So I think he's sensitive to what the Polish side sees as the delicate issues in Ukrainian-Polish relations and vice versa. Kuleba, if anything, perhaps spoke out of line slightly in the last week or two, talking about the bitter past in Polish-Ukrainian relations in the 30s in particular, and then in the 40s. Maybe it would have been more diplomatic to have not said that, but I don't think that's the excuse that he's being removed for. Polish-Ukrainian relations are at an all-time high in history, let's face it, and both President Duda and President Zelensky know that. So we don't need people to rock the boat and to focus on issues that are delicate, sensitive, painful to both sides. We have to grow up and face those in due time, come to terms with them, own up to the truth of what occurred, the damage done and crimes, shortcomings on both sides, etc. But for the moment, the main thing is to stick together. There's a common task to defeat the enemy from the east that is imperialistically rapacious, targeting Ukraine, but obviously not seeing Poland as a friend, seeing Poland as an enemy, even from way back when, from the 19th century and even earlier. You've just had your anniversary of the Polish uprising in Warsaw. You remember the Soviets staying on the other side of the river, not coming to help. You remember what happened to Poland when the Soviets arrived in 1944-45. You remember that experience until Solidarity, and thank God that Ukrainians and Poles have managed to find a common language, and that with you as a strong partner, because of your role in not only Eastern Europe, but in the EU, that you've managed to help Ukraine also stand its ground and to feel comfortable in East and Central Europe of today.
Mr. Bogdan Nahaylo, thank you so much for your insight, for your input. That was Editor-in-Chief of Kiev Post, Mr. Bogdan Nahaylo.
Thank you.
Have a good night. And that completes our edition of World News Tonight for TVP World. I was your host, Diana Skaya. Have a good night. Thanks for having me with us.